The question is that the House do now adjourn, and I give the call to the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise to speak about the status of women in this country. From the scourge of gender-based violence to the stubborn gender wage and superannuation gaps, Australia has a long way to go in achieving true gender equality. Last year shone a light on some of the core institutional barriers to the advancement of women in Australian society. We saw a cultural reckoning in this very building, the exposure of a toxic workplace environment which too often has ignored the appalling treatment of women. This led to an outpouring from women around the country who related to this and said enough is enough. We saw our 2021 Australian of the Year, Grace Tame, shine a light on the sexual abuse of Australian children and the rights of victim survivors to talk about their experiences. Last week we saw Grace Tame and Brittany Higgins speak so eloquently and with such power at the Press Club, confirming their status as two of the most courageous, inspirational Australians. I also want to acknowledge now some of the strong and inspiring women from my electorate who have bravely shared their stories with me of such experiences, including how often they have been let down by the very systems that should be there to support and protect them. None of these women wanted to be in a position to be talking about these things, but their work, as well as the work of countless others, is changing the conversation around gender-based violence in this country, and it's something for which all Australians should be grateful. Because if we look at the facts, women still face many barriers, and that needs to change. We've heard a lot of talk from the Morrison government about women, but not a lot of action to really addressing the inequalities faced by Australian women. To really address these issues, you need a government that really actually cares about inequality and how to address it, not just how a photo opportunity could help to address an immediate political problem. I am proud that Labor is, and always has been, committed to equality for women and are committed to a suite of policies to address the many facets of gender inequality in this country. First and foremost, we need to ensure that women are safe, both at home and in the workplace. The Respect at Work report found that 2 in 5 women experienced sexual harassment at work in the past 5 years. That's why Labor will legislate to make it clear that employers have a positive duty to eliminate sex discrimination, sexual harassment and victimisation. In the home, we know that 1 in 6 women have experienced physical or sexual violence by a current or former partner, and that 1 woman is killed on average every week. Right now, women fleeing violence are being turned away from accommodation and services because of insufficient funding towards sector workers and the failure to recognise this tragedy as a national priority. A Labor government would fund 500 new community sector workers, with half of these in rural and regional areas. These workers would include caseworkers to help women leave violent relationships, financial counsellors for women in financially abusive relationships, and support workers for children. We would also appoint a new Family, Domestic and Sexual Violence Commissioner to act as an advocate for victim survivors, coordinate national safety policies, provide reports that track progress against the national plan, and work with states and territories to gather data. Housing is also crucially important for women's security, and a Labor government will create a $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund to build 20,000 social housing properties. 4,000 of the 20,000 social housing properties will be allocated for women and children fleeing domestic and family violence and older women on low incomes who are at risk of homelessness. We have a continuing gender pay gap in Australia, where we face a 20% gap in total wages and women retire with 40% less super than men on average. I'm proud that Labor is going to legislate to close the gender wage gap with a range of policies, including empowering the Fair Work Commission to have more power to look at wage increases for female-dominated industries, including some of those that we have really been at the coalface through our pandemic: aged care, early childhood care and education, female-dominated industries who have really helped to get us through this, and it is time they receive the pay and respect that they deserved in that way. It is not just one policy that is needed to address these things. It is looking at the issue of gender equality across the board. Our childcare policy is another really key element that will make that conversation more equal as families discuss who goes back to work with ongoing...
The honourable member's time has expired, and I give the call to the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.